off the bat we got lied to, kind of thing. And then
exactly, that's not a good way of starting off a pandemic. That's so
right.
I hate that. I think that he has to be held accountable to that, and the CDC does too. This is disinformation. So there's a difference between misinformation and disinformation. Disinformation is purposefully changing the words on the screen or what the research shows when you're educated enough to actually know the difference, but you represent it as a different way in order to push an ideological point of view. And I think unfortunately this person was pushing disinformation. One of my goals with this channel is to bring science outside of its bubble, to engage with people that are outside the mainstream. I want to talk with people about science to show the awesome things that we are doing in science, but then also, why do they believe the things that they do? What set of data and facts and resources are they using in order to make their own ideas? With compassion, science can be more impactful. Without castigation, without ostracization, we're actually able to engage people and figure out why do they believe the things that they believe. I think science becomes more impactful when we engage with the broader audience, when we engage with more people than just the people in our bubble. So thank you so much to Phil for this awesome conversation. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it like I do. Hello, how's it going? I'm joined here with Phil, and we're going to have a discussion here on some things. How you doing, man?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. I'm really excited. Thanks for coming on and being willing to discuss this. I really appreciate keeping the dialogue open and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I actually feel appreciative to be able to talk to you. I don't really get to talk to that many, smart people that have done a lot in their field. And I'm appreciative to talk to someone that is smart and wants to have a conversation. So
awesome. Yeah. I guess starting off, your background and how we met on the subreddit No New Normal, which is kind of I don't know how you describe it. A lot of people that are skeptical about the new normal of masking and vaccine and a lot of this stuff around SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. I think there's a lot of different types of people on there. So I just kind of wanted to see how you're coming at it and what you feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of different types on No Normal. I mean, I would describe it more as activism.
Okay.
But I mean, they're not necessarily all trying for the same thing. But some of the people, a lot of people agree on certain things like not mandatory vaccines. Some people, think that the vaccine works. And some people don't think the vaccine works. Some people are terrified of the vaccine. Some people have taken the vaccine. So there's a lot of different discussion there. But, it's just like a hodgepodge of people that traditionally get censored. So it's discussion about, mostly vaccines and mostly not wanting to comply with everything that is being said. So, yeah.
I guess, how did you find the subreddit, and why are you in there?
So I would browse lockdown skepticism a lot, and I found the subreddit through there. But for me, it's more about, I find the content interesting. I read a lot of sources, not just No New Normal or lockdown skepticism. I read if you a lot of times I'll go to Hacker News. They'll post journal studies. I'll read I know what the mainstream points are, and so I like to get the other side too. And I do agree with a lot of the things they say on there. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good question, a good intro into one of my big question is where do you get your info about this? Where do you become informed and try to do when you're doing your reading? Where are you going?
So it's very easy to have the mainstream sources because those are just everywhere. You go on YouTube, you get the mainstream opinion everywhere. You go on various places, you get the all the information you need. So for me, I will take some information from No New Normal, but I've been on the internet long enough to know that not everything you read is what it is. So I read there, and then on Hacker News, there's a lot of discussion that gets popped up. Especially if it's like relevant discussion, something that's new that's happening. There will be discussions on Hacker News, and so I usually read the journals there and get their opinions too. So that's traditionally where I'm getting most of my information. And Hacker News, they're not skeptical people. They post traditionally what most people agree on.
When you say like post journals, I mean, what are you talking about? Which journals do they? Is it hackernews.com? I was just trying to bring it up, but.
Yeah, hackernews.com. It's mostly like tech geeks that are posting on there, and it's mostly tech related stuff. But they do post about COVID. It's not obviously not the main topic, but that's why I kind of use it, is because you get to see when some important new study comes out, or something that is like new, not just like you're going off the news. It's like it kind of trickles down into this is important and this isn't important. Pay attention to this, don't pay attention to this. But the Hacker News is traditionally liberal people that are software developers, and they're posting the mainstream stuff. So there's been articles to the CDC. There's been articles to various journals, and unfortunately, I don't have all that in front of me.
Okay.
It would be hard to
share my
pull that stuff
screen
up.
right now. I'm going to share it. So this is what is also being shown on the stream, by the way. So I'm streaming my screen so you can see it. So I did a Google search for Hacker News, and there's news.ycombinator.com and then thehackernews.com.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, cool. All right, so it's like a democratically voted up and down kind of thing, a vote, kind of like Reddit.
Right. Similar to Reddit, but like probably less crazy, to be honest.
Okay.
But yeah, it has the most rational discussion I've ever seen, and that's why I traditionally like it. And they they follow pretty much all the mainstream opinions, but a lot of people have like rational discussion on there. If someone's like cynical, they're not just censored. There's some sort of discussion going on, which is why I like to go to that site.
Okay, cool.
I mean, you could probably browse the page, find a few articles, and see. Maybe you want to even sort by top or whatever. You could probably see a few COVID related things that is from a mainstream source that the masses would be like, yeah, that's the correct thing.
Okay, cool. So I guess what's the latest thing on your mind with this whole thing that's going on with everything?
All right, yeah, I actually have something recently on my mind, because I am constantly thinking about this, and I record video journals. I don't publish them or anything, and they're mostly just like me thinking through what's going on, what are the solutions, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And so I did have something recently that I made a video on that, it's like I don't have a person right available to me to give me this kind of information. And, so I kind of feel like lucky that I get to talk to you in this case.
Okay, cool.
Because I get to, bounce some things off of a person.
Okay.
This might be a little bit of a longer point. Do you mind?
Let's go.
Is that okay?
Man. No, this is
okay.
Unlimited time. I'm here all night.
Okay, perfect. You believe that there are asymptomatic cases that can spread COVID, correct?
Yeah. I want to. Usually, I like to designate. I like to get really in the weeds and designate, just like how we designate HIV and AIDS. I like to actually talk about SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, because just because you have HIV doesn't mean you have AIDS. Just because you have SARS-CoV-2 doesn't mean that you get COVID-19.
Okay, but like if a person has COVID, it's possible that they don't realize they have COVID and that they can spread it. Do you think that's true?
So speaking technically, they would have SARS-CoV-2 and they don't develop the symptoms for COVID-19. I think that's what you're trying to say.
Well, I'm just trying to wonder
I agree
if
with
they
that.
can spread it to another person without knowing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So that person could have SARS-CoV-2, and that could, and then they don't have the COVID symptoms, and they don't have all the symptoms that are associated with it, and then they could spread SARS-CoV-2 to someone else. Yeah.
Right. And I believe that too, because I've actually gone through COVID, and so has my wife.
Okay.
And the person that gave it to us, they're living in our house, and they interacted with the person with COVID, and they came back, and then we ended up catching COVID, and we know it was from her because we were actually wearing N95 masks. We were being like super paranoid about it. This was like, in December of last year. Okay.
Okay.
And so we were pretty paranoid about it. She has asthma, so we're like, okay, we don't want to catch this thing no matter what.
Yeah, for sure.
And so when we got sick,
oh, you dropped, I think, or I dropped.
you see that we got sick from her. She wouldn't have even known she had it.
Yeah.
So I do believe that there's like asymptomatic cases. There are people on No New Normal that don't believe that, but I've seen it like kind of firsthand.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I think that you have like a 14-day window usually of when you get it, and that's a whole thing. Basically, like you basically have the virus getting up to a critical point in your body. And then it can still transmit and stuff like that, even though it hasn't come to the critical point and actually to have COVID-19.
Okay. So, I have a question, because this is what I was thinking about. Okay. Like, how the vaccine, it reduces the amount of symptoms you have, right? Traditionally. So you don't usually you have less severe symptoms, and if you're less likely to get hospitalized, you're less likely to die. Okay. I'm one of these people that actually believe the vaccine works.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it does what it says it's supposed to do. Do you think that's a correct assessment, that it lessens your symptoms, and it reduces severe illness, and it reduces death? Do you think that's a correct assessment?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, I think that, I mean, if you wanted to finish your point, that there's also actually a debate within the scientific community about this point, kind of an interesting tangent if you wanted to go down, but you can finish your point as well.
Okay, yeah, maybe I'll just keep going.
Okay.
Do you think that there are more vaccinated people that are asymptomatic than unvaccinated people?
Man, that's a really good question. I think with community spread, it's really hard to know at this point. I mean, we basically epidemiology usually takes the amount of genetic mutations that we can find in a genome, and then we know the viral rate, the viral mutation rate, and then we can back calculate to how many genomes we think there are. And I mean, the numbers are staggering. It's like 20 to 30% higher than what it is. The studies are actually really crazy. I think the community spread was a lot higher than the confirmed cases were. So it's hard to say whether or not that was last year. Now with the vaccinations, it's actually, I don't know. With the alpha strain, I can see how you would lessen the amount of spread, but with the Delta strain, I think that there's a fairly high degree of breakthrough infections right now. I don't know actually the rate. I'm not an epidemiologist, but
I mean, and it's fairly new. All this stuff is fairly new, so the data is still emerging. But do you think that a person that has the vaccine that catches COVID is less likely to catch on that they have COVID than? I mean, I'm not going to compare it to the unvaccinated group, but do you think if you catch COVID and you have the vaccine, you're less likely to know it had you not taken the vaccine? I mean, is that possible, since it's reducing your symptoms, right? And maybe if you hadn't had the vaccine, you'd have a cough, but if you have the vaccine, you don't even have a cough, and maybe you don't even catch on that you have COVID for a while. I mean, is that a fair assumption, or am I just going?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think that since the severity of the symptoms is going to be lessened, and to be honest with you, a lot of the vaccine, it matters when you got vaccinated. That's another big thing. So at 6 months, your antibodies start to lessen, and that's why Pfizer a month ago and Moderna like last week both said that they recommend booster shots because you go down like 20% of efficacy by time. And we know now by sequencing data.
Am I still with you? Awesome.
I can hear you.
Yeah, keep going. Sorry, it cut out for a sec. It's okay.
We know that like by about after 6 months, you start losing about 20% of the efficacy, which means like how it's able to actually fight, and your titer on your antibodies goes down, and that's just with the alpha strain. So now we know that like you get good robust antibody protection on the Delta strain, but only if it's a new recent vaccine. So, when people are 6 months out, and a lot of people got vaccinated in January and February, and we're coming up past 6 months now. And, it's going to be, a lot of those people that are past 6 months probably will start getting starts showing symptoms. So if you look at the screen right now, I'm showing like we actually by sequencing data, about 82% of our cases in North America are the Delta strain. So it's very high. And in January, when it just started, I mean, it was predominantly the Alpha strain. So it's just a lot. It's just the Delta variant has completely taken off, and that's partly because it's 1,000 times higher viral load than the Alpha strain. So it's easier to transmit. Go ahead.
I was reading the CDC data, and it was like 10 times, or it was like showing the R naught or whatever. I was like, okay, the Alpha is 2, and then the Delta's between 5 and 10, which, I mean, you can imagine like how much it spreads more. So, okay, I going along to my basic point I was kind of trying to get to, it seems to me like there's a number that we can get to when we're trying to weigh like community spread, and like kind of like if we're comparing two groups, which is the unvaccinated versus the vaccinated, in terms of how much community spread there is. And what the data seems to say is that a vaccinated person spreads the disease less than an unvaccinated person. Do you think that's correct?
So this is actually kind of, yes. I mean, traditionally, yes. And with a fresh vaccine, yes, that would be the answer. A lot of the CDC is actually linking to data. This is kind of what I was talking about, where it's kind of a debate right now. So so unvaccinated versus vaccinated viral loads. There is there is one paper out that's in Medical Archives. Medical Archives. Are you familiar with the publishing steps that are needed for a paper?
Not really, but I'm sure it has to be peer reviewed, and
exactly.
I don't know what else.
Yeah, so like basically when you're writing a paper, you have like their lab, and you put that together and you do the research, and then you go to a journal, and before you go to that journal, you can basically put it out called a preprint, and preprint has not been peer reviewed. It has not been, and it's basically currently being changed, being assessed by experts in the field. So this could change. This is not accredited, and this is actually a big problem that I have with the CDC. They should not be informing any type of national mandates or anything with unpeer reviewed data. I mean, this is a preprint, and there's been a lot of papers that have actually been retracted. Since this all started, and I think it's bad practice. I think it looks bad, and there's just not a good look to be using unverified data. Because, for example, there's actually a Nature paper. Let's see. Sorry.
No worries.
Trying to find it.
I mean, I trust
here
you
we go.
enough to, if you just want to paraphrase it, but yeah.
Yeah, I like to bring it up and quote from it when we can. So this is like
perfect.
From Nature Medicine. So this is a brief communication. Brief communication is not like a full research report. It means that they've had some type of study that they can release, but it's not like a huge investigative research article. But, here in March, they actually found the initial report of decreased SARS-CoV-2 viral load after inoculation with the BNTB16B2. I believe this is Pfizer. I'm not 100% sure of it is the Pfizer vaccine. So it's kind of an interesting case study actually out of Israel. So Israel actually only got the Pfizer vaccine. So it's a really, really interesting case study where we can actually see how just the Pfizer vaccine's doing compared to in the United States where it's a mix, and all the data is showing that the Moderna is significantly better than the Pfizer.
I read that recently.
I actually don't know. I'm actually really curious, like what is making the Moderna vaccine so much better? Is it the RNA sequences that they're using? Is it the amount of RNA that's in the vaccines? I don't know. It's kind of it's an interesting.
Yeah, I heard that there was I think it's lipids or something. There was more in the Moderna than the Pfizer vaccine or something like that. I'm not really sure. I'm just
so it's lipid nanoparticles.
Trying to recall.
So that's how actually. So the biggest problem with RNA vaccines is delivering the RNA, because RNA is inherently unstable, and it's not like DNA where DNA can be at a crime scene for days, and it's stable at room temperature. RNA degrades really quickly. So the big breakthrough in RNA vaccine technology was lipid nanoparticles that coated the RNA, and that basically allowed it to be protected. And then there's basically something called PEG, which is polyethylene glycol, I believe, that actually coats the lipid nanoparticle and then allows and facilitates entry into the cells. So it's that's pretty much what's in the vaccines.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I want to talk about. So
okay, cool.
But like there is something I want to kind of get to real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just assume for a second that the vaccine does produce that it does reduce spread, meaning it has like a lower, like the if you're a vaccinated person, you have a lower R naught than unvaccinated person, correct?
Okay.
If we're assuming that it reduces the spread better than an unvaccinated person. And I think that's what a lot of people assume. Like, I don't know if everyone does as much due diligence as you do, or if the media does as much due diligence, or presents it in the way that, this is still developing science. A lot of times what you're hearing is that, this is the fact and this is what it is. And so traditionally what you hear from the media is that the vaccinated people are spreading the disease less than the unvaccinated people, and that the vaccinated, and so they're essentially saying that the vaccinated people have a lower R naught. I don't know what that R naught would be, but I want to just give a quick example, and maybe you can poke holes in my example, because this is what I was thinking about.
Okay.
So if a vaccinated person has an R naught of 5, an R naught of 2, meaning they only can spread it to 2 people on average, and then the unvaccinated person has an R naught of 4, so they spread it to double the amount of the vaccinated person. Going along the lines of like the reduced symptoms, I was thinking that isn't it possible that the vaccinated person figures out that they have COVID at a later time than the unvaccinated person, because they have less symptoms? They're less likely to realize that they have COVID, whereas the unvaccinated person will be hit harder. They're gonna find out they have symptoms quicker. So
it's okay. So can I reiterate your point back to you to make sure I understand what you're saying?
Yeah.
That basically that the viral load that a vaccinated person is going to give off is lesser, so that if they transmit it to someone else, the viral load that person's going to get is less. So then they can keep the vaccine, they can have the viral load at a lower amount for longer, which means that then they wouldn't exhibit COVID symptoms as soon.
Not that yes, not that they wouldn't exhibit a COVID symptoms as soon, but that their symptoms would not like alert them like as just a regular person, not like scientifically, that a normal person wouldn't react to the minor symptoms they have. You know, if they're vaccinated, because it just feels like something minor. Oh, I have a sore throat. You know, I'm not thinking about this could be COVID, or because I have a vaccine, right? They're trusting the vaccine. Oh, I have a headache. This could be anything. Oh, I have a cough. This could be anything, right? They're trusting that the vaccine's doing what it's supposed to do. And so even if they have symptoms, they're not like necessarily automatically going to COVID because they trust the vaccine. Whereas the unvaccinated person is walking around being like, you know, oh, hey, I have this symptom. Maybe it's COVID because that's on the unvaccinated person's mind. Whereas maybe I'm using psychology here. It's not strictly like science or, you know, straight numbers. But basically what I'm trying to say is that that an unvaccinated person is probably more likely to walk around as an infectious person with COVID than the unvaccinated, meaning they're going to take longer to isolate themselves than the unvaccinated person. Do you think that's like a fair conclusion, or am I just way off?
Yeah, I mean, you start seeing symptoms when you have hit a certain critical amount of the viral load, right? Or the virus in your body. And when you have too much virus, you die. You know, so I guess if you're starting off with even a higher amount as an unvaccinated person, you're going to exhibit COVID symptoms sooner. And they are going to be more severe, so that you would eventually see, maybe that I do have COVID-19, even when you have, I mean, if both vaccinated and unvaccinated have SARS-CoV-2 in their system.
Right, and they're infectious to other people.
Exactly. I think there's a critical thing. So I'm not an immunologist or an epidemiologist, so it's hard for me to say exactly how the immune system would be different. But I'm a microbiologist, so I think kind of like in evolutionary terms. So can you think of why that would not be a good thing in terms of evolution?
Well, I'm thinking in terms of the media narrative is that the unvaccinated are spreading this disease more, meaning that we need to make, government decisions based on this when, even if there's reduced spread among unvaccinated people, the unvaccinated people could go 5 days at an R naught of 2 and not isolate until the 5-day mark because they're trusting the vaccine, and the unvaccinated person with the R naught of 4 could go 2 days without being like, okay, well, crap, I'm going to isolate myself. Meaning that the unvaccinated person in that time period spread the disease to 10 people, and the unvaccinated person spread the disease to 8 people. And I mean, I look at some interesting numbers, which is like, you have high vaccination rate in Israel, right? But there's all these weird correlations where, people are getting, as you're giving more people the vaccine, there's this weird correlation where the cases are rising. And I just wonder if, there's this over trust that the vaccine is like doing its job. So people like lose their guard. And when they show even a minor symptom, they're still out there, spreading it, which, in my mind, that could account for, an increased spread, that possibly the vaccinated people are actually spreading the disease more than the unvaccinated people. And it really has to do with psychology more than anything else. It's like how a person reacts when they encounter a symptom. If you're a vaccinated person, you trust the vaccine, you trust you're not going to get it. Therefore, minor symptom you write off. You're unvaccinated, you get a symptom, you don't write it off because you are smart enough to realize that, hey, this is a disease. And I think even if you go to no new normal, most people agree that this is a disease, this is a serious disease, and you can die of it.
Yeah,
and,
I mean,
and that's
unfortunately, I've had some discussions in there where people are denying that, the 600,000 people have died, and that
there's
I
all
don't
sorts
know.
of spectrums.
Yeah, exactly.
I
It's hard.
100% agree.
You seem a lot more connected to the data and thinking about these things a lot more than the hardline, like conspiratorial people. And
Right.
I mean, these are like deep epidemiology, immunology questions that are really fascinating, and I like to discuss them though. And I think that what you're getting to though is that the people that are vaccinated to the alpha strain, and they've been vaccinated 6 months ago, and they might be able to spread the delta strain really well. And that's very true because the increased viral load, masks aren't 100%. They decrease it by a percentage, not an absolute amount. So, there's going to be some type. You're not going to wear it 100% perfect, and nobody's walking around in airtight bunny suits that they have in the viral lab. So, there's going to be some slippage that happens. The idea with masks and vaccinations is that it's like Swiss cheese defense, but you have multiple layers of Swiss cheese. You have some slippage from the mask, you have some slippage from the vaccine, and the point is that if I have a vaccine and you have a vaccine and we both have masks on and we talk to one another, hopefully if one of us has the Delta mutant, your viral load that actually gets to you or gets transmitted from the SARS-CoV-2 Delta infected to the other person is going to be so low that viral load isn't going to actually make any type of COVID symptoms at all, and you'll be fine. And that's actually last year. That's kind of like what they were talking about. And this is why I was so mad at Fauci and the CDC for even saying that you're going to get more sick with masks and all that kind of stuff. That was just complete bogus. Because the reality is that, for the longest, and, this is what they transitioned to the last, 6 months of the year was, hey, you can actually decrease the viral loads that you're sending from one another, and it's kind of like a pseudo vaccine. So if you actually are capable of wearing your mask and they have their mask on, that you can actually get even if the person has COVID, which isn't ideal, obviously, but you might actually get such a low viral load that you kind of get the antibodies to it, and you're okay. Your immune system can handle it, and that's kind of the goal as these mutants spread, and now. I mean, it's an RNA virus, and RNA viruses mutate so quickly. Coronaviruses are really unique with how big their genomes are. They have a really cool proofreading mechanism. They mutate really quickly. And that's why RNA vaccine technology is actually so cool, because they can actually change the sequence to be that specific Delta variant or Lambda variant that we have now, and we can take care of it. I think we're going to see that personally within, in December, 1 year after the vaccine has been released, we'll probably see, the new RNA sequences coming out in the vaccines, and, that'll be in the booster.
That's great. I mean, there's so much that you said there that I want to talk about.
Cool.
And I'm glad we have a little bit of time to talk about it. Just going back to your point about, no new normal. Some people are a little crazy. Some people don't think this is a thing. Some people, there's all sorts of spectrums on there. I think that if you're trying to understand an anti-vaxxer, you gotta, if you really want to understand them, you got to understand where they're coming from, and a lot of what you said, talking about Fauci, is kind of where they're coming from in their mindset. Mm-hmm. And so when the coronavirus first hit, right? At first, we're getting told that it's not a big deal, don't worry about it, and then they're saying, okay, it is a little bit of a big deal, but don't wear a mask. But at the same time, you're seeing like doctors wearing masks and they're treating the disease.
Exactly.
So anyone with like a brain would be like, okay, so they're wearing masks, so the masks work, I should wear a mask. And so I mean, Fauci went ahead and said, okay, yeah, I said that because I didn't want it to be everyone to grab all the masks and the doctors don't have masks. So that, his little white lie or whatever. Well, okay, that was like right off the bat, we got lied to kind of thing. And then,
Exactly. That's not a good way of starting off a pandemic. That's so
right.
I hate that. I think that he has to be held accountable to that, and the CDC does too. And they did a really bad job of actually quarantining the people that came off of the cruise ship. They got that cruise ship, all the infected people that actually got released into a California airport, and they didn't quarantine at all, and then went across the country. You're like, what's going on? I thought it was awfully. They handled it awful.
Right. Bad. I mean, and it would be one thing if it was just like one, oh, hey, he told one lie or whatever. But then the next thing was that it's going to be 2 weeks. Hey, 2 weeks. That's all we need. 2 weeks. And the problem with that is that once again, anyone with a brain could have seen that it doesn't make sense that it's 2 weeks. It takes 5 days for you to show symptoms. And then at least 14 days for you to recover. So that's at least 19 days at the very minimum. So how is locking down for 2 weeks gonna like stop it or whatever, or like, isolate it or make it so that it's gonna go away? I think most people could figure out, okay, it's not going to be 2 weeks, and it wasn't 2 weeks, right? They're going to lock us down for longer than 2 weeks. But because our public officials do not trust the public can handle the truth, they withhold, certain elements of the truth so that, they can get their agenda done. And
I totally agree. I think that they could have done it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I think probably with a 14 day infectious window, you'd probably have to do 3. Basically, all we had to do is, as soon as we had known that it was coming out in December 2019, that's in January 2020 is when the sequence came out. So we know that it was the global pandemic then, and it was just bad. And we had the sequence. So all you do is you sequence, not qPCR like the normal test. You would do a sequence of them, because the sequence allows you to look at the mutations on the genome to see how many basically genomes there are in the world, and then nobody that comes in the United States would be allowed to get in without doing a 14-day quarantine. Then you take everyone in the United States, like everyone, and do a two qPCR tests 5 days apart, and then sequence. So then we have the sequencing for everyone. We know exactly how many genomes are in the population. We have 2 confirmed tests that are you're either positive, you're either negative. And if you're positive, you continue quarantining. And if you're negative, then you're good. It could have been over in less than a month. It was so frustrating.
Well, I mean, they could still do that now, to be honest. But
it's way too far back. It's way too far beyond that.
I mean, couldn't you just test if you send everyone a test and everyone takes a test, and I'm positive, I'm going to stay home, I'm negative. Anyway, that I didn't really want to get lost on that point.
Okay, sorry, I apologize.
No, that was me. I went along with you, but I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with logistics. Like, I don't know what was going on or how complicated that is, to be honest. But, it seemed like no country really handled it perfectly. And even the countries that did handle it, like, close to perfectly, it's like they lost something in order to gain, whatever they gained. And I mean, even countries that were doing really successful at the beginning, like Vietnam, it's like they ended up having their outbreak too. And it's like, I think that was very hard.
South Korea is still doing pretty well. I looked at their Delta variant hump, and it's pretty small. It's actually pretty remarkable what they're doing. I think, comparing to other countries is one thing, but, I think we could have had some good old-fashioned American exceptionalism on this one, and had rushed out all the sequencers, rushed out all the qPCR, the molecular biologists. I signed up for multiple lists when they were like, we're gonna need scientists in order to help with all this qPCR data. I never got a call. I was ready to help however I could, and So I think we could have done it, and we could have done it exceptionally well. And actually, sequencing is actually ridiculously easy and ridiculously cheap now. It's the cost has dramatically gone down, and the sequencing is only a small part. It's called amplicon based sequencing. We can go into that if you really want, but it's like basically a really small portion of DNA. Then we're looking for single nucleotide changes. So it's super easy, super cheap, super quick. Yeah, it's just really frustrating because we had all the technology, we had all the ability, we didn't utilize it.
Did we really have the logistics? I mean, we have a lot of undocumented people here now, and we don't know if they would have necessarily trusted the government to just, I'm going to give you whatever data you need. And on top of that, even if we did nail it perfectly, we have people crossing into the border. We're not isolated like New Zealand. And it's like those people are not documented. We don't know about them. It's like, I feel like with this kind of virus, with how easy it is to spread, I mean, yes, I think, if you go back to the beginning, if you have lesser cases in the beginning, obviously you're going to have lesser cases as it goes on. So if you nailed it in the beginning, it's way less. You're gonna have a better chance going forward. So I agree with that, but I kind of feel like if with our open border, there's people crossing over, and I don't know if complete control is there. And I think at the same time they were dealing with lots of unknowns. At first they thought it wasn't going to be a big deal. You could just catch it. It was going to be fine. Then they, kind of backtracked. They're like, okay, it's a little bit worse than we thought. But you're probably right. We could have done it better. But what I was going along with was trying to get into like the anti-vaccination, mindset, essentially.
Yeah.
Like,
Thank you.
no worries. Why they're kind of untrusting. So it's like the 14-day thing or the 2 weeks or whatever, where everyone knew what was going on. And then masks don't work, masks work. There was that was the next one. And then I think the latest one was that in my opinion, anyone who thought about this for a second would know that booster shots were inevitable. But that was not presented to the public that, hey, you're going to need these first two, but you're also going to need one after that, and then possibly one after that, and then that was just withheld. Why was it withheld? The motivation was because they wanted to get as many people vaccinated as possible. But going along the lines of why, an anti-vaxxer, has problems even trusting the smallest things, it has to do with, they've constantly withheld information at every single step. So you get to this step and it's like, well, you guys have already withheld all this stuff, and now you're telling me to believe you.
Yeah.
And that's like a really hard sell for a lot of people.
I totally agree. I think, I'm gonna have an editorial thing coming up on one of my science episodes. I'll give you a preview of the list that I have going. It's ridiculous. We have the no sequencing done for the qPCR tests when this all started. We had the CDC actually redesigning the qPCR tests, even though the WHO had their own primers, and then you had a bunch of false positives that were coming up at the very beginning, and that created some reservations about the qPCR tests. You have the Fauci quote with the face masks make you more sick thing. And then you have the CDC and not handling, I don't feel like, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine hold. So, and then if you look at the rate of vaccinations after that, all vaccine rates go down, all Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, everything goes down after that. So I don't think that they really handled the public health on that one. No clear, when it was going down, there was no clear guidance when the face masks were going to come off. So like, hey, I think that they should have been more clear. Like when the numbers hit this many cases per day and this density, we're going to advise to have masks go off. And then the masks, when they did say that the masks were going to come back on, the previous week they were going around saying that the masks will never come back. So they need to like finish the sentence, put the second part on it. Well,
at least done everything they know, but unfortunately they don't feel like they can do that because they feel like that's going to hurt their vaccination numbers. And like a lot of the thing is like, okay, there are adverse effects to the vaccines. Yes, they are very rare, but the truth of the matter is, even if they were not rare, they probably would not be forthcoming in that information because they have an agenda that they're pushing right now, and I think that's a lot of the problem with why people are so untrusting and why they won't even take the vaccine in the first place is because if there were serious side effects or if they knew something that they knew would hinder the population from doing what they want, they would not present that. And it's, I mean, I feel like that's fairly true because if you, even the news cases, it's like, they're not reporting on all the people that are, surviving COVID, right? You have a huge population that's surviving. They're reporting on all the people dying of COVID. And the news itself will just, that's, they want to make money. They want to, fear makes money. I mean, there was that one guy on CNN who got caught on, hidden camera saying, how, when the COVID hit, they were making all this money and they saw how, if they had, the death ticker on the right side of the screen, then, they were able to have more viewers than if they removed that death ticker. And so there was this like huge, cell of like this virus, which doesn't help the trust factor. And the news, they have agendas too, and everyone has agendas. And
I think your point, like, I think let's separate them, right? Let's talk about the media, and then let's talk about the CDC and the HHS. The HHS,
absolutely.
I think what you're talking about is the VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. Is that right?
I mean, I'm just talking about in general because I feel like yes, there's a lot of reported thing through side effects through the VAERS, but there's also side effects that are kind of being withheld or misclassified. And it doesn't even have to be done from a top level. There's just this general idea that that you should probably suppress this, or it doesn't even have to be from a top level. It could be like a bottom level doctor or a mortician that sees a blood clot in a person's brain. That could have happened because of the vaccine. It could have happened not because of the vaccine, but of course it's very hard to prove one way or another. But that data, isn't necessarily presented when, a lot of times with the COVID cases, it's like there was some misreporting, and I understand it's difficult to report, but there's also agendas at play. And that's where really people are very skeptical because of the agendas. They don't feel like they can, necessarily trust everything that's being said.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can break it down if you want. I'm perfectly fine with that.
I think I see a lot of people in the making like a similar argument to what you're talking about, like talk about VAERS, and I just wanted to point out like on VAERS's own website. Well, one, VAERS is like transparent because you can download the data, right? And I'll say this, like, for what it is, like the open data, open science movement and stuff that's actually been a real plus in the age of SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 because the sequence was known really quickly. It was out there. The primers were out there, so they could be verified and tested. There's like over 76 RT-qPCR tests that are being used by different biotechs to look for the presence of SARS-CoV-2. It's pretty cool. Like you can, you yourself can download the SARS-CoV-2 genome. It's not behind like a paywall that would, that might be traditionally enacted in some parts of science, which I don't support, by the way. But anyway, key considerations and limitations of the VAERS data. I think that people are missing out on this because what they talk about a lot is they look at the reports and instances in the VAERS, and then they say, hey, it's flatlined for so many years, and then there's a huge spike in vaccine VAERS data. It's like, well, that's true, but we've never had a mass vaccination like this since maybe like polio. But it even says on the website, VAERS providers are encouraged to report any clinically significant health problem following vaccination to VAERS, whether or not they believe the vaccine was the cause. Reports may include incomplete, inaccurate, coincidental, and unverified information. The number of reports alone cannot be interpreted or used to reach conclusion about the existence, severity, frequency, or rates of problems associated with the vaccines. VAERS data is limited to vaccine adverse reports received between 1990 and the most recent date. And then finally, VAERS data do not represent all known safety information for a vaccine and should be interpreted in the context of other scientific information. So what do you think about that? Does that strike home with you?
No, that makes complete sense.
Okay.
And I mean, honestly, if you're reading it that way, it's like, hey, there could be a lot of, data in there that is incorrect in terms of, hey, it might be reporting higher than it is. But I kind of look at it the same way as I look at COVID. It's like, how do you know how many cases there are? Well, you're going off of how many people are getting tested, and not every single person's going and getting tested. When I caught COVID, I did not go and get tested. It was mainly because they were using that data to determine whether or not to do a lockdown, and I didn't want them to do a lockdown. So it was in my benefit to suppress that data into that database. But I think that, there's a lot of cases of COVID that have gone unreported. And I also think that it goes the other way too, where there's probably a lot of vaccine side effects or serious critical side effects. In fact, I know of at least 2 that have happened in kind of my circle, that were, can you say it was 100% the vaccine? You can't, but it looked kind of suspicious. In one case, my cousin got the vaccine, and 2 days later she had a miscarriage. Can you say for certain that had to do with the vaccine? No, you can't. And then in another case, my sister's friend, she got the vaccine, and 48 hours later she died. Now, I have a lot of people in my circle that have got the vaccine, and they've been perfectly fine. But in both those instances, they didn't make a report to the VAERS system. One of them said that, hey, I don't want to mess with that, and I don't want to. I think it was some sort of political stance she had. And I don't think the other one got reported either. Now, can you say that was, certainly the case? No, but I think a lot of times, when someone unexpectedly dies, you can't necessarily say, oh, that was because of COVID, or that was because that person just had a heart attack. I mean, maybe you're going to discredit me on that point. But, I think that obviously the data is incomplete, and when you interact with a vaccine hesitant person, that's where their mindset is going, is the data is incomplete. And on top of that, there are motivations to not have complete data because you don't want to scare people from getting the vaccine.
Well, I mean, like the science is completely independent than the media and the CDC and stuff like that. I mean, these are independent labs that would, I mean, if they were...
They're just people, though, right?
I know, but man, I'm telling you, I'm telling you, if you can show me that there's a huge spike in lethality in these things,
Oh, I'm not saying that at all.
No, I'm just saying, I'm not saying that you're claiming that, but I'm just saying, for me personally, if anyone has that data, let me know. I will publish it, and I will take the Nobel Prize for myself. You know what I mean? There is such a selfishness in science in order to be, and then to push this out, to get this data out, and I think that's something that people kind of get wrong sometimes, is that they think that there's a hegemony, there's a cult think in science, where it's you can't break the glass walls and stuff, and it's the exact opposite. Actually, there's every incentive for yourself in order to break every glass wall. You just have to have the data. You just have to have the showing that. I think you're right in the fact that there has to be more autopsies and stuff like that done. I've seen a couple the papers on that. So I found like for one the example, I can bring on this the screen, this one from China. This is the first case of coronavirus in China. They did an autopsy findings of this. It's apparently, so I'm not a medical doctor, but apparently these type of medical autopsies are extremely rare in order to do them. And it's kind of hard because it's like, how do you know that you're dealing with an n equals 1, right? And you don't know if, like, just like you said, there could be a lot of coincidences. And how do you know that, like, this person just didn't have like an enlarged heart or, over time, and now they died and they have an enlarged heart. So it's like they're going through and they're looking at things that are abnormal, but it's like, how does it rate against the other, the person over time, or, stuff like that. I think that we have to do more tests. I think that the existence of a mass vaccination program like this is just screaming for an epidemiology. And there's a ton of papers coming out, to be honest with you. The Lancet, New England Medical Journal, they're constantly putting out stuff, and they've done a cool job, and they've removed the paywall for a lot of these things. So
great.
It is there. I think that, and I think one of the worst things that science does is that it exists behind the paywall. It needs to be out there. It needs to be, accessible and engageable. And that's kind of like why I also have this YouTube channel. But anyway, I totally agree that we need more funding for this stuff. We have to have way more research into what's going on with this. But what I don't like, let's see. Where is it? There's this paper that I saw on No New Normal, and this made it viral on the subreddit. You might have caught it. It was a person, an MD, doing a presentation for the doctors. What's it called? The Frontline Doctors of America, and they basically did the conference, and they're doing it around the country, but this is the yearly symposium that they did. And this guy was talking.
The virus, everybody's heard about this ACE2 receptor. Here's an example. So on the left-hand side, this is one of the cells that lines your blood vessels. I'll show you a chart in a minute where we have ACE2 receptors. So on the left-hand side, you see kind of in the corner of that upper grid and the bottom grid, these nice smooth lines. On the right-hand side, this is what the spike protein, just the spike alone from the vaccine, is doing to the mitochondria of your cells. That's the engine of your cells. That's what gives you energy, the power of your cells. Compare the left, the smooth, nice, put together. Compare the right, blown apart, fragmented. That's from the vaccine, not from the virus, from the vaccine.
This is disinformation. So there's a difference between misinformation and disinformation. Disinformation is purposefully changing the words on the screen or what the research shows when you're educated enough to actually know the difference, but you represent it as a different way in order to push an ideological point of view. And I think unfortunately this person was pushing disinformation. And misinformation would be like someone taking that and being like, oh, I saw a doctor talking about how the vaccine actually gives you a bunch of, problems, and the spike protein is, has all these problems with it. And the spike proteins in the vaccine. And this is what they were talking about, that the spike protein itself was causing these problems. So this is the paper, SARS-CoV-2 spike protein impairs endothelial function via downregulation of ACE2. ACE2 is the thing that is actually being binded to by the spike protein of the SARS-CoV-2. And in the presentation, he talks about this. He talks about these the red dots, and he purposefully takes the figure A here, and he takes it and he crops it out so you can't see the hamster lung tissue, can't see that it's hamster lung, and he goes and he says, this is from the vaccine. This is your body on the vaccine, and he points to these pictures and he looks at.
It's not a human.
It's not a human, and on top of that, this hamster didn't even get the vaccine. If you look down in here, this is from a representative histopathology of lung specimens from a 17-week-old male Syrian hamster 5-day post-administration of a pseudovirus overexpressing a spike protein. So this not even close to being a vaccine. This is not even the SARS-CoV-2, and it's overexpressing, meaning that they took the the genetic regulatory elements of this spike protein production and cranked it up so that that DNA is constantly being, or RNA in this case, constantly being made into a protein, which causes a bunch of different, side effects and stuff. And if you even go back to, and this is why it really makes me mad, man. Although the use of this non-infectious pseudovirus is a limitation to this study, it's like they even realize they're even talking about it. The researchers, I think the researchers rightly so are trying to figure out how does this spike protein interact with the ACE2 and all that kind of stuff. And they're using a hamster because humans are really expensive to work with. It's kind of like a huge problem, and they're really bad test subjects. So we have to use mice, we have to use hamsters, and so the researchers themselves were clear. They were clear in this. They were clear in the figure. So it's stuff like that. Go ahead.
I can definitely agree with that. I think that whenever you have people with motivations, and I think partially, this kind of thing exists on both sides. And I'm not talking about that specific case. I'm talking about a lot of times I feel like these days, there's this approach to science where it's like I'm trying to come to this conclusion that reinforces what I've already, come to the conclusion beforehand. I think this happens in journalism too, but it's more like, okay, I'm trying to get to this end conclusion. What can I get? What can I, how can I present this to get to that end point instead of, I'm actively trying to it's like you have a hypothesis in science, right? And I think a lot of times people are like more so trying to prove their hypothesis as opposed to disprove their hypothesis. And I think that does happen on both sides, and it creates distrust of the entire system. And I don't think it's just universally, on that side or this side. I think it's happening on both ends. And I mean, that does help. I mean, it causes, people to doubt certain things, but and we've seen it a few times. And honestly, I feel like a lot of times with the, everyone's trying, like, for instance, any study that's going to come out today, they're pushing the vaccines very hard. And so any study that is, being conducted is in that light, in the light that, I'm trying to prove that these vaccines do this or do that, and I'm trying to disprove that, there's major side effects. I'm not saying that there is or there isn't, and I agree with your assessment because about the, if there was these mass side effects, the hospitals would be way more. It would have been very much more clear by now, and so I don't like I don't like the, I'm coming into this with a pre-imposed, outcome that I'm hoping for or that I want for, or, I don't think science should be, biased like that. But I do feel like a lot of times it is. And, I think that, sometimes the people on our no new normal, they're just going to, they're going to believe what they've already had in their mind, and they're going to look for all the data points that point to what they already believe. And I think that exists on the other side. They already have what they believe in their mind. They're going to look for the data points that, that come into play that proves what they already believe. And I think that's a little bit dangerous. I mean, because you want just the truth to be out there. You don't want any sort of bias to be in place. You just want the truth, and you want to present it accurately, and you don't want, all this hidden information or because that's what creates the distrust. And I mean, I think the agendas, that's where people are, that's where the real, if you want to talk about why are people hesitant, it's because they are afraid of what the agenda is. And when something like, COVID is being used to, increase certain government's powers or increase a person's status or increase something like that, then they become extremely skeptical because, they're using this as an opportunity to gain more power. And, that's where people are even more resistant because, what is your agenda? Is your agenda truthfully public health, or is it to gain more power? And, can we trust you with this power in the future? I would like to talk about mandatory vaccines because, in my opinion, the base strategy is incorrect. And I feel like part of the reason you're talking to me right now is because you want to help promote more people to get vaccinated, and the reason you're looking to promote more people to get vaccinated is because you believe herd immunity is a thing. Is that correct?
I'm just trying to talk to you to understand your point of view. I genuinely think that it's good to be vaccinated. I don't think science really takes the standpoint on like the political ways of going forward, and I think that that's up to policymakers, and I think that's up to how governments figure out how to do it. I think there's also epidemiology evidence to show that, there was really good evidence to show that the forced vaccinations in schools led to the decrease in polio and measles and stuff like that. But I don't have like a personal recommendation of forced vaccinations, and like the idea of someone being strapped down and like a needle being shoved in them is disgusting. I would normally
right, but
that's just
but like the policymakers are making the decisions based on the science that they're being presented, and they have a lot of advisors that say, hey, for instance, Dr. Fauci right now has a lot of power. If he says something, a lot of people jump. So he's like a scientist that is, in a way, influencing public policy decisions. So it's like they are intertwined in some way, regardless of if it should be that way. It is happening. He's making recommendations for mandates. And I don't deny that, mandates have some sort of effect. But in my opinion, we have to be working towards a goal. And in my opinion, what a lot of certain scientists, certain people, certain policymakers, they have this idea about herd immunity when it comes to this virus. And I would love to talk to you about it because, in my opinion, that does not seem very likely to me. And it's not just purely like, hey, let's take this from a scientific standpoint, but it's more like, so also, hey, let's look at people's actions and what they are likely to do and what they're not likely to do and why they're not doing it. It's like, hey, we're going to mandate this. So, this thing, well, is that going, it'll cause more people to get to possibly take the vaccine. But, are you going to get to the number that you need to? On top of that, it's like you said it yourself that this thing has so many variants. It mutates so often. So it's like, I just want to go through it with you. They're trying to get to herd immunity, and they're like, okay, hey, if we can vaccinate 90% or 80% of the United States, we can get to herd immunity, and that all these unvaccinated people are causing these variants to pop up. But the problem is like, okay, we've seen that the virus has mutated multiple times in the course of 1.5 years essentially. It's already mutated quite a few times, and you said that as well, that it's mutated a lot, and let's just say by some miracle we were able to vaccinate our entire population and the United States achieved herd immunity. The issue is that the other countries are not on the same rate as we are. It's like, if unvaccinated people cause the variants, then you're going to have various variant factories all over the world creating variants that will eventually, mess up your vaccine. And then on top of that, you throw into the fact that, hey, it requires a booster every 6 months. And
it only requires a booster because the mutations just keep happening. If you, in your example, if everyone got vaccinated, then I mean, the vaccine for polio or whatever, the sequence or the plasmid that it is, it's not an RNA vaccine, but you know what I mean. The strain of polio that we vaccinate for isn't changing constantly, so the vaccine is a lot more effective. I mean, it's a different type of virus. It's a different type of virus. RNA positive strain viruses are extremely, I actually don't know what polio is, are extremely susceptible to mutations. But if we quickly come to a herd immunity, then we are more effective towards the mutations or the strain that we got vaccinated to. That's the idea.
Right. So, but like, there's going to be variants that pop up. So we have to take pretty much no matter what, because the world, I don't know what the actual rate. I imagine it would take longer to vaccinate the entire world than in 1 year. But there will be variants that come along. Delta's not going to be the last one. There's going to be more and more and more and more. But like, I mean, is this really possible? You're going to have to force each person in the world to take not only their first shot, but if someone got their first shot, they're going to have to take the next one to the next booster, and the next one to the next strain, and the next one to the next strain. It's like we still have the flu, going around, and don't we still have the original Spanish flu variation still happening? I mean, I don't know exactly the story of the Spanish flu, but I think it was H1N1 or something. But I mean, my point is that, like, why can't we, eliminate the flu? Because, every year it's a different strain, and, then it goes back to it kind of goes in cycles. But I feel like they are heading for an unreasonable goal, and that's why there's this massive emphasis on, vaccinating everyone. And I think most people hold this ideology. This is what's been pushed for a while now, is that, hey, if enough people get vaccinated, we're going to reach herd immunity. But like, in my opinion, and I think a lot of the anti-vax people are in the same place, we don't think this is actually achievable. And if it is, it's like you're going to sacrifice so much to get there that, like, is that really worth it? Like, at some point you are going to be, hey, when this mandate doesn't work, you're going to take a little bit more, and you're going to take a little bit more, and you're going to take a little bit more, until eventually you're forcing it. And in my opinion, just having the mandatory vaccine policy is a very slippery slope, because, hey, right now you trust this vaccine, and you trust it's working effective, and you trust all that stuff. But at some point in the future, you may be like, we may have a leader that doesn't do science very well, or he's just super dumb. He doesn't trust the scientists, and he's pushing a vaccine that you personally do not agree with, but you already have the system into place to force compliance on this vaccine, and all of a sudden you're being forced with something that you don't want to take. And it's like, yes, you're worried about this and you trust this one, but when I'm coming into my decision making, I'm going, it's fine. I don't necessarily distrust this vaccine, but I disagree with giving this kind of power to the government, because it can be abused, and I do believe it will be abused at some point. Maybe it's not in the next 100 years. Maybe it's not in the next 200 years. But I think at some point you're going to get to a point where a person is going to force a vaccine that you possibly don't agree with, because the science doesn't say it, but they have enough power to actually force this thing. I mean, I'm a computer scientist, so I know a lot about, how software works. And, truthfully, with blockchain technology, that is the future, and that kind of cements systems into place. So if you have a mandatory vaccine system that is on the blockchain, there's no amount of, willfulness or protest or trying to overthrow the government that is going to eliminate this system. Essentially, you will be forced to take this and you will have no way out of it. And so it's like this door that they're heading towards is a very scary door in my mind, because I know what the future of tech is, a blockchain technology which cements systems in place. And you put your mandatory vaccine system on the blockchain, and there's no way around it. Eventually, you're going to get injected by a person that could be a literal maniac, and you have no way to prevent these kind of things. It's a very slippery slope, and something I feel very strongly about, because I think this door should be avoided at all costs. Honestly, it's very dangerous to trust the central authority or a government with this kind of power, because it can be very easily abused. And it's like, I'm not your typical anti-vaxxer. I don't think that this vaccine is going to have serious, problems. But I do have a real problem with, trying to mandate something that a person really just does not want to take. And I don't think that, even if their reasoning is completely unsound, that this should be something that is forced. And I understand, there's been other cases. You did smallpox, you did measles, but at the same time, we have to recognize that this is a fairly new vaccine. I understand it's been developed since 1996 or something, but it hasn't been mass tested on a population since 1996. It's like most people that are anti-vaxxers, quote unquote, they have no problem with their measles, the smallpox, because it's been around long enough. They're not so worried about this. This one is fairly new technology. It hasn't been through the ringer as much as as the other stuff. I mean, honestly, if people were given the choice to wait 3 years, that is enough for people. But it's they're not being given the choice to even wait 3 years for something that they don't trust. And like you said, the RNA vaccines are new technology. It's not like you're injecting a dormant virus into your body like the other vaccines are. These ones are, it modifies the spike protein so it produces antibodies, or it modifies RNA so I don't know, the science of that, but it produces the antibodies for you, and it's not the dormant virus. And I think that there's a lot more factors into play than just strictly science. It's great to make decisions based on strictly science, but we're not all scientists. We're humans, and you can't really remove humanity from the equation here. I mean, yeah, that's kind of my spiel, I guess.
So how do you feel about other mandatory vaccines? Like you have to have a lot of different vaccines in order.
Yeah, I agree with those.
Interesting. Okay.
The fact that it's new, the fact that it's new is the real issue on many people's minds. So it's like if you implemented this policy 10 years from now, after we've gone through enough period of time, that's the thing. But realistically, how much time have you been given these people to actually think about this? 8 months, 9 months. 9 months is what you've given these people to actually weigh these options, and it's that's not enough time for a lot of people. And I'm just gonna speak personally for a sec, okay? For me personally, I'm a person that I'm a person that doesn't like to take any pharmaceutical drugs at all. For instance, I have a headache, I go out of my way to not take ibuprofen as long as I can until I'm okay, this is just too bad. Or I'm in pain. I just, I'm not the type of person that will just jump into whatever drug. And to the point where, most people don't consider caffeine a drug. Right? I want to just cut off my caffeine consumption one day. And that's what I did for about 6 months. I was like, I just want to see what I feel like without doing caffeine for 6 months. And, honestly, but, I'm the kind of person that, if I'm addicted to something, then I want to see what it's like without it. I want to be able to break that addiction. But what we're being presented with now with these vaccines is that you are basically going to be forced to take if you want to be protected from COVID, you're going to need to be taking a vaccine every, I don't know, whatever months. You're telling me it's not going to be 6, but I don't know. So far, it's been 6. You're going to have to take a vaccine every 6 months for the rest of your life. Like Dr. Fauci just went on there recently and said, hey, it might be indefinite. You might have to take these forever. And it's like, so I have to take a pharmaceutical drug every 6 months for the rest of my life. That's like a big, hurdle to jump through. And it's like, well, you have to make this decision now because we're forcing them. And it's like, I don't know if I want to make that decision. I'm a young, healthy person. I'm not diabetic, so I'm not constantly taking shots. But you're telling me now I have to be a diabetic person that's constantly taking shots. That's like a big deal for me for the rest of my life. I'm 30, so 50 years from now, for 50 years, I'm going to be taking 2 shots a year. That doesn't sound like that doesn't. I was saying, I made a journal. I was saying in my journal, I was like, I don't care if, you have the cure to aging. It's like, I don't care if you have the cure to cancer. All I have to do is take this drug constantly. Like that is like kind of a huge deal to me. I don't like to be addicted to some drug or dependent on some drug to live,
how, like, you'd decided that you had said earlier that you would take it if it was like 3 years old, though, like the vaccine.
Well, I think a lot of people would be less hesitant, but I think that if the vaccines were more effective, in terms of they didn't last only 6 months. If you could tell me that I could take this vaccine or I have many situations in which I would probably just go to the vaccine. If I got sick every 6 months and it was a horrible illness every 6 months, I'd be like, this is unbearable. But like I went through COVID and it wasn't that bad. I haven't caught it again. And so it's like, it's it's a tough thing. It's a tough decision because like taking a drug every 6 months is a big deal. If we had a vaccine that lasted 5 years, 2 years, 3 years, and there wasn't breakthrough cases and you didn't have to worry about catching it, like it gave, like for me, it's like it satisfies your fear, right? Like if the vaccine satisfies your fear and it's like allowing you to go back to your normal life, then hey, that's a success. But if it doesn't like allow you to go back to your normal life where you're not afraid, I don't find that to be like a major success, to be honest.
But we're going to kind of the catch-22, right? Where like we have to take it every 6 months because there's new variants that are being formed, and there's new variants being formed because people are hesitant about it, and people are hesitant about it, so they spread it more. So we have more mutations. So we have to have another. You know what I mean? We're kind of like going in a circle.
I get what you're saying.
Circle here, I guess. Like, I'm really curious about this. Like, why trust the FDA if you care so much about and you're skeptical about these, why why does the FDA, isn't there that
I don't care about the FDA,
but doesn't that have the same type of kind of like weird incentive profit motives, or not? Well, FDA is not for profit, but I'm saying like it's kind of like it's the government. It's the same as the CDC. It's HHS. You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't. The FDA has like no bearing on my decision at all. Like I don't care if it's an emergency approval or if it's been approved. I mean, it doesn't make a difference. The reason I'm not taking it isn't because I'm scared of side effects. Like I'm not scared of side effects. The reason I'm not taking it is because, well, I'll tell you, I've caught COVID. Okay, and so what does catching COVID do? It produces the antibodies for you. What does the vaccine do? It produces the antibodies. So I have the antibodies that will protect me. Now, how long those last, there's all sorts of studies saying, you know, some studies say 6 months, some studies say 10 months, but in the moment right now, I'm mostly protected. So I have, you know, I essentially have immunity in the same way that, you know, a person that's been vaccinated has some sort of immunity. But, you know, so it doesn't make sense for me to, you know, it's like you take your 2 shots, right? And then, you know, do you go and take a 3rd shot 3 weeks later? No, you don't take a 3rd shot 3 weeks later, but they're telling people after they've caught COVID, go and get the vaccine, go and get your shot. So it's like you're putting more antibodies in your body. But it's like, is that really necessary? Shouldn't you wait, like how it dwindles over time? Shouldn't you wait that period of time, just like you do with the COVID shot? Like they're completely writing off natural immunity 100% when it literally makes no sense, because they have all the studies from 2020 to 2021 when there was no vaccine that said that, hey, you know, you're less likely to catch COVID again, 10 months out. If you do catch COVID again, 10 months, you know, after 10 months or after your immunity period has, you know, dwindled, it's more likely to be less severe. But like you're just getting into segregated classes because they want to push the vaccine so hard. I mean, there's all sorts of motivations. They can control people better if they know how many, like they can understand the herd immunity rate better if they know the vaccination number better. But I mean, I don't know. For me personally, I caught COVID. I have some natural immunity, and then I go on Google today. I type. You can pull this article up yourself. I type COVID reinfection. Okay, and one of the top articles is COVID. People that have recovered from COVID are 2 times more likely to catch COVID. I don't know if you want to pull that one up or not.
Yeah, I got it.
But okay, they're 2.34% times more likely to catch COVID than the people that haven't been vaccinated. Okay, and I'm like, that is very misleading what it's saying right there, because first of all, it's not, they're not like really comparing it to actually they're not comparing it to like the baseline number of like just your chance of catching COVID in the first place. They're comparing it to the people that have already caught COVID.
Wait, so real quick, the COVID-19, that paper that you sent me, that I pulled it up, is that from the CDC, the reinfection with COVID-19? Is that what you're referring to?
No. I'm referring to a different one. Sorry.
Okay.
And I didn't send you the link, but if you open Google, and you type COVID reinfection, it's like one of the very first links.
Assessment of
and I think it's
SARS-CoV-2 reinfection 1 year after primary infection. That might seem element.
The article says people with COVID, and I think it's from a trusted source. It says people with COVID are 2 times more likely to get reinfected, something like that. I can look at your screen. Let me see.
Okay. Yeah. That is it. Okay. So this is that study. They reduced. This is what it is.
Okay. Yeah. That is the study. Okay.
Twice. Okay,
I think you're on the right page.
Yeah, these findings suggest that among persons with previous SARS-CoV-2 infection, full vaccination provides additional protection against reinfection. Among previously infected Kentucky residents, those who were not vaccinated were more than twice as likely to be reinfected compared to those with full vaccinations. All eligible persons should be offered vaccinations, including those with previous SARS-CoV-2 infection, to reduce their risk for further infection.
Right. And that sounds very scary and convincing, right? It sounds like if you've caught COVID, you need to go get your COVID shot because you're 2 times more likely to catch COVID, right? That sounds pretty scary. But like, if we need some actual baseline numbers to actually, get to a conclusion. It's like, okay, if your chance of catching COVID with immunity, with natural immunity, is 0.1%, or no, let's just say your chance of catching COVID with natural immunity is 0.2%, and then you take the vaccine, it reduces it to 0.1%. Well, oh great, that just proved your study right there, right? But your odds of catching it are still 0.2%. Like that, very, 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 very low. In fact, possibly lower than a vaccinated person. But that's not what's being presented. What's being presented is you need to take the vaccine because this study says you're 2 times more likely, but they don't present it. And you go online, you find the studies of the chance of reinfection rate. You can go straight on the CDC website. It says the chance of reinfection for a person that's already caught COVID is very rare. That's what it says on the CDC webpage, that it's very rare. So it's like you're cutting numbers, your 0.1% versus 0.2%. Obviously, I don't know the real numbers, but it's just being presented in a in a manipulative way, honestly.
So at the end here, I think that this is what they're talking about. So when we're thinking. So when we're thinking full vaccinations of so what I know about previous SARS-CoV-2 infections is that basically you have more antibodies the more severe your case was. So if you had a really mild case of your SARS-CoV-2 led to a very mild case of COVID-19, you don't have like a robust immune response. And then also full vaccination provides additional protection. That makes sense because like basically what we were talking about, you have more antibodies more closely related to your shot. So that hypothesis, both of those make sense with what was the data that's been presented. They do have the tables. This is where they're getting their data. So table 2 here, association with SARS-CoV-2 reinfection with COVID-19 vaccination status. So I don't know what these controls are. All case patients reinfected and control participants not reinfected had previous SARS-CoV-2 infection documented by positive NAAT or antigen tests. So that was another thing how do they know that they had SARS-CoV-2, right? That's kind of a big thing. So they had a confirmed test. They didn't just think that they had it. They actually had it during March to December. So it was pretty long time ago now. Reinfection was defined as a recipient of positive so another positive test. And then you could look at the control participant versus case participants. So there's significantly more people that didn't have the vaccine than that did. The case patients are the ones that did get fully vaccinated.
Right, and the data is clear. I'm not denying that study is 100% accurate. My general point is that if you're talking about hey, these natural people with natural immunity having recovered, they have a 0.2% chance of catching COVID again, and the vaccine makes it so they have a 0.1% chance of catching it again. Those are your numbers right there. Like what I'm saying is they're not. Like, no one's presenting the data that says, hey, if you've caught COVID again, the likelihood that you catch, like, they're not, how with the vaccines, they're saying, hey, the vaccines are 42% effective, or with the Moderna, it's 62% or something, right? They're presenting that for the vaccines, but they're not saying with the natural immunity, hey, your protection against COVID over this period of time is 98% or 94% or 67%. They're not saying that because most likely, I mean, maybe they are, but I have not seen anything presenting, the true numbers of how effective natural immunity is. It's just saying, hey, you need to take the vaccine. And I'm not denying.
They're saying that right here, actually. The control participants are the ones that never got vaccinated. So we can actually tell that exactly what you're talking about. So this is the month of initial infection in 2020.
Wait, sorry. I had you cut out for a sec. Can you repeat what
you were talking about? Seconds? Like, we can actually look at the rate that these people actually got SARS-CoV-2. Probably, the difference is the Delta. It's the Delta variant. Like, they didn't do sequence. That's the big thing here. I wish they had done Delta variant sequencing. Sequencing is so cheap. It really frustrates me when people don't do it's just a half-ass kind of thing. They need to do the sequencing. It's so stupid. Anyway, so I'm confused about this. Like, I guess the surge, these people got a month of initial infections. It's really low in March, and then it just ramps up. And you can see, like, man, in October, November, and then December, they have
Say when they first got the
initial infection, in 2020. So this is on the right is the control participants that never got a vaccine ever, and then all these people eventually got reinfected a second time. But the second time is probably the Delta variant. But
how many people did not get reinfected a second time?
Control participants, so the not vaccinated. I guess they would. I guess how would. That's a good question. 492. I guess they're always going to be bringing people in the study that got it again. So that's kind of like the limitation of the study, in that they're always going to be they're searching.
But they should have just grabbed 1,000 people and just used that as like a fair group. Like, then of those 1,000 people, this amount got reinfected, then you can get the proper rate. So they're not saying they don't have any group that did not get reinfected then in this study.
By definition, I think that's the whole point. They were trying to study the people that were reinfected, and then looking
compared to the vaccinated.
Yeah. So I think that was the whole point of it. So I guess they don't have your exact question. I think that's like normally science, like, papers, the best are ones that have just one question, and they're looking at just
it makes sense.
So
the control I'm sure their study was accurate. I mean, it makes sense, knowing everything we know about the virus, that as time passes, your antibody load goes down. But is that such a far number? Like, I honestly think, I mean, maybe I need to do more research, but I honestly think that, if you're talking about, the vaccines only being effective 6 months.
6 to 12 is what the companies are saying, but yeah, I hear you.
Okay, well, there was studies that were coming out, in late 2020 that were saying, hey, you're good. If you've caught COVID again, the likelihood that you catch COVID again within the next 10 or in a 10-month period is very low, right? It was pretty rare. Nowadays, the studies they're presenting and the news articles they're presenting is painting in a different light, because they're trying to get people to take the vaccine. But, if you do the Google search with the time constraint on there, and you say, you go from January 1st, 2020 to December, or you could even do late 2020, all the studies were saying that, chance of reinfection is rare. The CDC webpage even says chance of reinfection is rare. It doesn't say rare over a period of time. Of course, they don't really have enough data on that.
Yeah,
but
it's hard to know, because you can't really predict it, because we don't know what the mutant is going to be like. We don't know what type of, basically there's a basal rate of mutation that we know an RNA positive strain virus has and a coronavirus has. But then there's recombination that can happen. So basically, you can get infected with multiple types of genetic sequences, and then those can recombine inside you, and you can actually get some crazy mutant that that happens. So we don't know, and as more variants are out there, more it's just more recombinations are happening, more mutations are happening. So it's hard to say, what you're saying is we don't know how long like an alpha variant is going to be strong, because if you look at the data, I mean, look at, when it's like, okay, in April, it's 45% of the, April 2021, alpha's 45% of the United States population. We're only looking at North America here. Then we go down, and now alpha's only 6%.
Right.
So, and now the Delta variant's 82% of the total in North America, the amount of strains. So it's like that made a huge shift. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard to get the information. But just a question to you: like, do you think if it was shown that the people that caught COVID have, a higher, higher, resistance to the new strains, and they're less likely to catch it than the current effectiveness of the vaccines, which I've heard it said 42, 60 something, for the Delta variant? Do you think that information would be like readily available? Because what this article is saying right here is, hey, take the vaccine, and then what you get on all the other articles that say, hey, take the vaccine even if you've recovered. Do you think they would present the information that says, hey, if you've caught COVID, then your resistance level is higher? Do you think that study would be published?
I actually
not
have it on the screen
published.
right now, which is kind of cool. So again, I don't trust the CDC or the Fauci or individual. I trust the science, and a lot of the science is just out there. It's just that people are not exposed.
It's hard to get. Well, it's hard to get to it because the media pushes what they want to push, so you can't always get the article.
And look at exactly, man, and exactly what you're talking about. Like you get these Forbes, USA News, Stat News, CNET, and it's like these are all editorialized, and it's always better to just read the CDC, the actual, go back to the study, because this is all editorials for clicks, and exactly what you were talking about before, where it's like, I don't read that stuff personally. But anyway, so trained immunity is basically what you're talking about. And this is a review talking about, so this is the abstract. SARS-CoV-2 infection is mild in the majority of individuals, but progresses into a severe pneumonia in a small proportion of patients. The increased susceptibility to severe disease in the elderly and individuals with comorbidities argues for an initial defect in antiviral host defense mechanisms. Long-term boosting of innate immune responses, also termed trained immunity, by certain live vaccines, oral polio vaccine, measles, induces heterologous protection against infections through epigenetic, transcriptional, and functional reprogramming of innate immune cells. So what they're saying is that the boosting of these trained immunities gives heterologous protection, meaning that not just for that one, but for other, like, wiggle room too. We propose that induction of trained immunity by whole microorganisms vaccines may represent an important tool for reducing susceptibility to severity of SARS-CoV-2. So I think that's kind of like an interesting response. They're talking about whole microorganism vaccines here, which is not just the spike protein vaccines, giving and this would give you more of that like larger breadth of the ability to deal with more variations in what's going on. Because like, why don't we have a coronavirus vaccine? I mean, that's the biggest, and it's kind of like what you're talking about with like every 6 months we got all these variants, and now we got the variants of the variants. Like, the strength of the RNA vaccine is exactly that. Like, we can change the sequence, we can put it out for the new variant, yada, yada, yada. But like, can we train our immune system to just take out coronaviruses entirely? That's a really cool new area of research, and something that's been tried for coronaviruses in the past, because of that's what the flu is, but the seasonal flu. But anyway, it's a cool idea, man. Like, the science is always going. Like, even if the media or whatever is happening in the world, like, the science in order to push this stuff is going forward.
Right, and I think that's amazing. I just wish that we didn't have arbitrator or middlemen deciding what articles to highlight and what articles to kind of hide, and it's based on what is my motivation? Well, right now my motivation is to get everyone vaccinated. What am I going to highlight? The ones that say everyone should get vaccinated. What am I not going to highlight? It's like there could be a million studies that say all sorts of different things, but unless people see them, it doesn't affect any real world change, unfortunately. And it's like, I mean, I think we've seen a lot of censorship lately, and that plays into the fact that, you know, people are going to be more skeptical, because when they find something that, you know, they think has been censored, they're more likely to trust it because it's been censored. It's just this weird thing. Like, why is this thing censored? They're obviously hiding it for a reason. Maybe there is a good reason to censor it. Maybe it is misinformation. Maybe it is disinformation. But, like, you know, there's so many, there's people picking which, you know, scientific studies you're going to see. I mean, I think you have methods to where you can get drilled down and get to, you know, the root of it, but the majority of people do not have the ability to do that. They have to just, you know, take what's given to them. And I mean, I think it's very unfortunate. I wish there was a study, just going back to what we were talking about, I wish there was a study that said something about, you know, that where they actually measured, you know, the effectiveness over time, because I'm not denying that natural immunity does provide immunity, although I'm sure some people would want to argue with that, but natural immunity does provide immunity for a period of time. I would love to see, like, the dwindling, you know, what are the numbers on that? You know, 6 months after, 10 months after, you know, okay, well, here's a new variant. I understand you're saying, okay, well, there's a new variant, but we have so many people that have already recovered. Shouldn't we have better data? Shouldn't we have at least some knowledge of how likely it is to catch, you know, it again? You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would love to see, like, those studies. And I'm not all about, like, oh, you know, I don't reach for the, you know, clickbait things. I reach for, you know, the things that, you know, make sense, right? Or the things that, you know, the journals, or something that is outside of my wheelhouse that is saying something that, you know, is interesting. It's not strictly going off of, you know, hey, No New Normal posted that. I mean, No New Normal posts all sorts of crazy stuff. I mean, that's fine. People believe different things, but I don't grab every single thing that I read off of No New Normal and go, yeah, that's it. You know, it's like, if I could see studies that said something, you know, we know that at this point that the vaccine dwindles over time. So you can pretty much assume that with the natural, you know, immunity, that likely dwindles over time. I think that needs to be studied. But I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think that, like, if there was no Delta variant, that these vaccines would not need booster shots?
I mean, I mean, in a perfect world, or like without evolution, then I would assume that no, I don't think so. No, without mutations and evolution, then you wouldn't need one.
So if it was just if we only were dealing with the alpha, you know, COVID, these boosters would be a lifetime of immunity.
Yeah, just like the polio vaccine is, because I mean, there's not basically the polio, which, by the way, I looked up. It was so cool. I had no idea. The genome of a polio virus is actually a lot like a coronavirus. It's just a lot smaller. So it's a RNA genome with a protein capsid. Same thing with coronaviruses, and then the genome is a single-stranded positive sense RNA genome. So that's crazy. It's just only 7,500 nucleotides, which is really small compared to the coronavirus. It's gigantic compared to that. And I mean, we only have one polio virus because basically there's not enough polio viruses to mutate and to recombine and to cause all these problems.
So. Yeah, well, that's interesting. I always thought that, you know, even if you know, there wasn't a variant, that we were going to need boosters, because, you know, as they were first rolling out the vaccines, they were saying, we don't know how long these vaccines can last. So I kind of just assumed, okay, well, there's a limited period of time. But I mean, I don't know enough about that topic to, like, know for sure. But it sounds like what you're saying is that, you know, you wouldn't need a booster if there was no variants.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have that spike protein and you have that ability to take it out. So, you know, it's pretty good. I'm trying to find, there is a study. So there is a study by Moderna and Pfizer on the boosters. It's the thing is, and critics say about this, is that basically they're paid for by Moderna and Pfizer, so they're biased. I would have said that before I got into science, but honestly, there's such a small amount of money for science research, and the research by the scientists is actually completely independent. They get the money, but it doesn't matter what the hell their study says. And what happens usually is that like scientists will get like a grant or something from this company, and then they'll buy like an expensive piece of an equipment or something like that they can kind of use for multiple things, and it kind of helps the lab out. So there's like kind of an incentive to work with these companies, and it's free money that's out there, and they're already in kind of like this area and this space, and they're getting a new piece of machine out of it. So it's kind of like, all right, I'm trying to find this study, but I can't.
What did the study say exactly?
That
If you can,
here it is. It's that you need a booster after 6 months. So a lot of people are critical of this, saying that, of course, the for-profit company is saying that you're always going to need a booster and all that kind of stuff. Which, I mean, these are for-profit companies. I mean, that's not, anything. And I'm presenting that data. This is literally from Moderna. They're paying for it. So, but this company wants to find money. I've worked at a biotech before, and there isn't any incentive to lie, because your product is out there. And if you get out there, I'm not saying that biotechs haven't lied in the past, or especially big pharma companies haven't lied in the past and stuff like that. But there's less incentives than you would think. Let's just say that, because there's other people in the labs that are double checking your work. Your shareholders are going to making sure that, and they don't want you to lie, this is 50 micrograms.
So are there studies saying that with the alpha variant they need boosters?
No, this is for the Delta. So this is what's crazy about this, though. What's really weird, and why my question is why is an alpha variant COVID SARS-CoV-2 vaccine effective on the Delta variant? It must be what we were talking about in that other paper, the trained immunity response, where you actually get like a secondary infection that's similar enough to it, that you have the transcription factors and all that kind of stuff that you can kind of like. It just allows your body to have all these pathways of increased metabolic activity and everything like going, so that you're able to kind of overcome all that kind of stuff. Even if it's not exactly right, you can still kind of use that stuff. And then so anyway, that's the only thing I can think of. Like, because you'd think that we would need to have a Delta variant for this, but basically. The spike protein is made in your body. The RNA is sent through the vaccine, and the spike protein is actually made within your body. So is the spike protein completely different enough that your body is no longer able to actually identify it? Well, it doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like it.
So I have a question. Let's see. Do you think there's a problem putting the same, you know how, there's the Delta variant, and do you think there's a problem using the same antibody, trigger mechanism in the booster shots? That's not modified, right? They're using the same drug as the first drug they produced. They haven't modified it yet. Do you think that can cause a problem, producing the same antibodies twice? The reason I'm asking this is because with every drug, with a lot of drugs that I know, for instance, here, I'm just going to go off for a second, but, you take a little bit of melatonin, and eventually your body stops producing melatonin naturally because, it's getting it from this drug. If you do like, a hard drug or something that produces serotonin, well, your body, produces less serotonin because it's getting it from this drug. does the same thing happen with synthetically, producing these antibodies to where your body, eventually stops producing these antibodies for you, or produces it at a lesser rate each time? Meaning, what I'm saying is, like, is the booster shot, is it going to dwindle in efficiency if you keep using the same booster shot?
I would think so. I would think so, but that's not what the data is showing. So that's what's kind of interesting about this. I guess it's because and because of the trained immunity, and kind of like what you were talking about, like, your body is basically adapting to making and dealing with infections, and even if it's not exactly correct, or 100% correct, 95% is enough. And all these parts, this is what they're hypothesizing here. So this is just this is a review of this idea, and they're trying to propose this. So it's not, they haven't researched this, and this has been proven true. But there's a bunch of increased metabolic activity, and for all these different proteins and stuff that are made. And that can help you. Full disclosure, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not giving you medical advice.
I understand. You're very good at reading the data and understanding it.
But
and
I
the
can say anecdotally, I can tell you anecdotally, I have actually, against the CDC's advice and FDA's and WHO's and all that kind of stuff, I got a third booster. I had Pfizer for my first 2 shots, and I was 6 months out, and I saw the data on the Pfizer against the Delta, and I was like, this is really bad. And I was way past 6 months, and I'm around a lot of unvaccinated people, so I went and I just scheduled an appointment, and I got a Moderna booster. And my third shot was the symptoms. I didn't have COVID, or I wasn't sick, but I had very just like my second shot. Your first shot, you're like, oh, this is kind of fun, woozy. Your second shot, you definitely feel it. And my third shot, I really felt it. So your body just kind of is ready to go. It's like a trained fighter, and it's ready to rip roar and ready to go. So
right. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because this is something that I looked at as well. I looked at Israel's numbers on their booster shot, and there was something very worrying that I saw in their numbers, and it said that about 1% of the people that got the third shot ended up in the hospital. And to me, that was a very, very, very large number, especially because, I don't think you have that large of a number with just the 2 shots. And, if that number transcribes across the board, that's a pretty big scare. And I don't know if I misread the data or if I'm just misinterpreting things right there. But, that is something that kind of threw up a red flag for me, in terms of that's a little bit scary. If you have a 1% rate and you're vaccinating 200 million people, 20 million people end up in the hospital. Is that what you're telling me? I mean, we're going to get more data as these things progress, obviously. But if I think that was just one of the initial reports. But 1% is a very large number. And then what you just said, that kind of just triggered my thought. But I hope. Look. For me, it's I'm rooting for the vaccines. I'm rooting for everything to be okay, and I'm rooting for them to work. But I'm not losing sight. I'm not just all in on one thing. For me, it's realistically, I think that these vaccines, they wanted them to do more than what they did. And I sent you a link to the FDA.gov because the reason I sent you that link was that, in the paper it says, who should, or what does why should you take this vaccine or something? And it says something like prevents COVID-19 in their trial studies. So what was sold was that it was going to prevent COVID-19. And now we know that, it maybe prevents it for some time. It maybe, it maybe does some things, but there are breakthrough cases, and we're seeing more and more of these breakthrough cases. Mm-hmm. And honestly, if you're talking about satisfying fear, it does not a lot of people haven't had their fear satisfied. I mean, even you yourself, you said that you went and got a booster shot. It didn't do what it should have done. And for me, it's like, well, should we just go all in on these two, vaccines, or should we consider, continuing development of something else that possibly could be more effective than what we're using right now?
Oh, you're totally right. I mean, it could be, a whole host of things. Yeah, I remember when I was getting my first shot, like this stood out to me too. The Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine is unapproved vaccine that may prevent COVID-19. There is no FDA-approved vaccine to prevent COVID-19. It's like, yeah, you're totally right. I mean, vaccine technology is going to still be improved. That perspective that we're looking at here that's exactly what this is, talking about ways that we could actually go after the coronavirus and get all these different mutants, not just the Delta and the Gamma one. Which, by the way, I just wanted to point to this Moderna from their data, and because you had asked about how it does, how the dose 3 does against the other mutants as well. So we have the wild type. This is a pseudovirus that they looked at for the antibodies. So you have after the month 1, month 2. So this is the post dose 3. And then this is day 14 post the dose 3 here. Huge increases in the amount of antibodies against the wild type, the beta, gamma, and deltas. So I thought that was interesting too. So it's kind of like what this, what we were with that innate immunity that we were talking about before. It's just kind of like an interesting hypothesis, and it's seeming to prove true on a couple different occasions there. I think it's one of those things, man. I mean, we're gonna keep going through the circle of mutant outbreaking into the vaccinated population, and then that's going into increased into prolific outbreaks into the unvaccinated, and then it's just going to keep going until we get ahead of it. We have to get ahead of this thing, and that we do that by making a really good vaccine that's super, super effective, that gets all coronaviruses, or we have an RNA virus, an RNA vaccine, that everyone takes all at once. It's so, but the coronavirus vaccine that's just still being developed, man. I mean, that's going to be, if people are hesitant about the RNA nanoparticle vaccine, that's been 25 years in the making, and we're still thinking and talking about this one. We're still thinking about this could possibly exist one day for the whole coronavirus one, and that's not even, that's currently being developed. So that's might be 20 years off. Who knows?
Yeah.
And
yes, I mean, I am not your traditional anti-vaxxer, and I do think, for me, if I was trying to give advice, and I'm sure people wouldn't follow this, but I would be okay, if you're a vulnerable population, then we should definitely protect those people, because the odds that you have a side effect, the odds that there's serious problems, even if there is some sort of unknown long-term side effects, you're already kind of towards the end of your life anyway, 65 plus, whatever. And you probably don't mind taking a vaccine for the rest of your life anyway. So it's I am, 100% for, vaccinating the vulnerable people. But for me, it's I think natural immunity does provide some benefit. And I don't think it's a straight edge approach, something like that, because, you do have to worry about overbearing, the hospitals, and you do need to know the numbers on the reinfection rate, and, if your body does a better job than the vaccine and that stuff. I mean, part of my issue here too is we have, people lining up for the third shot, but we have other countries that have their vulnerable population that are still, dying of this thing, while us, privileged Americans get to just, hey, I'm going to take my third one. Oh, I'm going to take my fourth one. It's this. There's some 80-year-old in Nigeria that's dying right now of while you're getting your third, and you're a young, healthy person that will likely not have very many serious issues. But I mean, I don't really like the discreditation of the natural immunity thing, partially because I kind of think of it as this. There's some psychology involved, and I think of it as like, okay, what is going to satisfy people's fear? Because the fear is, running rampant these days, and it's causing all sorts of problems that, mental health problems, all sorts of stuff, and, anger, anger towards people, all sorts of things that are, bad for society in general. But, it's like, okay, after you've recovered from COVID, when you're allowed out in the world again, you feel as safe as you can feel. Like you feel like you're never going to catch it again. You feel like I can do anything. I don't have to worry, because that's the truth. If you catch it, you got at least 3 months that you're 99.99% chance not going to catch it. But if you take the COVID vaccine, 2 weeks later, you can catch COVID. So it's not satisfying people's fear. It's like people still want to wear their mask even after they've gotten the vaccine. Whereas if you've gotten COVID, you don't feel like you could go talk to a person with COVID, and you can guarantee you're pretty much not going to catch it. You need a vaccine that gives you that kind of security. Like if it doesn't give you that kind of security, like kind of what's the point? I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
The point is you want to stop serious disease and you don't want people to die. But like, I also, think that like, people can achieve that security if they're extremely afraid, with a N95 mask. I know that like N95 masks have been like, scrutinized heavily because, you gotta, but if a person walks around with the N95 mask, they can pretty much, not worry about, COVID for the most part. And they could, and it even extends to whatever variant comes out too. It's like, oh, I have this horrible variant that kills like, all these people. It's like, guess what's going to protect you? Is it going to be your vaccine that just broke through immunity? No, your N95 mask will still do the job regardless of what's coming along.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, man, I don't understand why people don't wear, if they're wearing a mask, I don't know why they're not wearing an N95. Personally, I like the KF94. KF94 was developed by South Korea for like, as like an all day mask, because they knew they had to mass produce this thing in 2020. So they designed it specifically to be like easy to wear, comfortable. And so they produced a ton of them. Just make sure you're getting like their good ones. That actually say like made in Korea and stuff like that. I really like them, and they're a lot
I think
cheaper.
That's amazing.
They're a lot cheaper than the N95. I mean, there's like a weird thing with Amazon. You can't like make N95s from the United States. You can't sell them on Amazon because of like the medical like use disclaimer and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of a weird thing, but KF94 gets around that. The 94 means that it's getting 94% of the particulates at that level, that nano level, but or the micron level technically. And this is you can't 90 and 95 is obviously 95%, but it's not that big of a difference. So I think these are a lot more comfortable personally. But yeah, like people just wearing like a really like flimsy mask and stuff. It's like, if you're going to wear a mask, you might as well like actually protect yourself.
Well, I just think of it as like, what's going to satisfy your fear? It's like when you're wearing your little flimsy mask, you still care if that person across from you is wearing a mask. If you're wearing a very nice like KN94 or whatever you just said mask, you're not walking around hating that person that's not wearing a mask in the store. You feel protected regardless. And I mean, there was a reason the doctors were wearing them when there was no vaccines, and I'm sure a lot of doctors still wear them. I mean, I would, it's like the vaccines aren't satisfying your fear. I think that people need to have their fear, satisfied in some way. They need to have some sort of comfort, and either you catch COVID and you go through it and you got some, a few months of, peace, or the vaccine's not providing that. It's just not, and I wish it was. When it first came out, everyone was very hopeful, and people felt that they were protected, and now it's just not the case. And it's like I don't think that I don't think this, there's a pandemic going on of, the coronavirus, but there's also this pandemic of fear going on. And I think that's important to curb. And like, for me, it's just like, personally, if I was, horribly afraid, which I'm not, then I would, do what satisfies my, fear, what makes me feel, safe. And, I wouldn't want to just walk into a store and just start hating every single person around me. And even like hating all these people that are unvaccinated. Oh, I hate this unvaccinated group. It's like, okay, you hate them because you're afraid that you're going to catch coronavirus and die. So how can you satisfy that in some way? It's like, if you're really that afraid, I think that the N95 mask is a good tool, because, it doesn't matter what variant is going on, you're going to be okay. But, I don't know.
That's a
That was
great
just
point.
one of my points.
I totally agree. I think that's a great point. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. And it's more than just SARS-CoV-2, right? It actually helps with like all different types of communicable diseases that are orally spread. So it's like, it's a huge thing.
Yeah. So,
well, man,
yeah,
I
I
really
don't know.
appreciate you coming on and having this discussion. I thought it was really cool and like productive, and thanks again. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you wanted to say, or anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think, like, honestly, it was helpful for me too, and I really appreciate being able to come on, because I honestly, like, sometimes sometimes you want to hear the other side, but also sometimes you want to talk to someone that, does their homework and, has has a lot of information behind them, and has, a decent degree behind them that understands these things at a very scientific level. So it was fun to do it, and I appreciate talking to you.
All right, awesome, man. Well, I'm wondering, kind of like, I kind of wanted to do and go through this summer sessions frontline, not now, but maybe sometime later or something, since it was so productive and it was a good time. Like, I'd love to go through the White Coat Summit and stuff with you. And we could like discuss maybe what they're talking about, and at another time, and kind of like it'd just be kind of interesting to watch it with you and get your take on it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've seen this video pop up a lot, and I haven't really taken the time to watch it, mainly because it's like that's not what I'm making my decisions on. But I understand that a lot of people are making their decisions on something like this. So, yeah, I think that'd be cool.
All right, sweet, man. All right, well, we'll keep in touch, and until then, man, I really appreciate your time. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, see you, man.